All right, welcome to office hours for Monday, January 28th. Let's all say happy birthday, Jared. He's not here, but he has loaned me back to you for this hour. We have a strict whatever you want on your birthday policy, so I'm on loan. Okay, so today we are going to tackle how you work with cover designers to get kind of the most out of that experience. And also we're going to talk about how to set up a Permafree book. Now, I'm just curious which of those is most relevant to most of the people here in terms of what we start with to make sure we get through the bulk. People can weigh in. I mean, everybody's muted at the moment, so either cover designers, cover designers.
The other thing.
The making a Permafree book? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will start with cover stuff then, but we will work into the Permafree things as well. I'll make sure we save some time for that. And then we can always do a follow-up as well on the Permafree stuff, because there's sort of a couple stages involved in that. So as far as cover designers, how are people looking at in terms of needs? Like, are you needing covers for a series, you think, or short stories? I know was something that came up last time, or is it like an occasional sort of one-a-year novel series? I'm going to interpret that as series, yeah. Okay.
And if you could speak just a little bit about those essay things, which I think is a little bit like series in a way, but yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about was being able to publish shorter articles, and you can actually release any length you want on Kindle and other digital platforms. There is no requirement that what you're publishing needs to be a full-length novel or even a novella. So a lot of people are publishing short stories and nonfiction articles, like how-to kind of stuff. The way people used to just publish on a blog, a lot of people are actually publishing like meaty how-to short form things for purchase as well. Maybe they're 99 cents, maybe $1.99, maybe $2.99, depends, what you're teaching people. But there's some valuable skills and information out there. And if you bundle it up into a polished package, then that's a nice way to just have that content generating revenue for you as you go about your daily business in other things. So when we're thinking about it, seems like a lot of people have a series potential there. It is definitely easier to kind of get the whole series done together if you can. So let's say you've got a trilogy. When we're thinking about cover designers, often people move off and go and do other things. So you work with a cover designer on one book, and then maybe you go back a year or two later for book 2 or 3, and they may or may not be there anymore. And because of licensing rules, and because technically the design belongs to the designer, unless you have them sign legal paperwork relinquishing it to you, technically the designer owns the way that they put those elements together. And if they used their image licensing to purchase the image that your cover is made with, they licensed that. You didn't. So they aren't allowed to give you the source files to work with, and they can't just give you that image for use on other promotional materials. So that's one of the reasons why you might think about, if you are hiring someone to do your cover, you might think about licensing the image yourself that you want, and then actually having them do that for you. So one way to do that is you can ask them to make the covers using comped images. So just you can download something that has a watermark or whatever across it. And sometimes during the exploring phase, people will choose a bunch of images. The cover designer will do maybe 3 or 5 mock-ups or whatever of suggested directions things might go in. And then once you've chosen, they develop that specific direction. And so you can have them do the initial development with just watermarked images, and then whatever one you decide on in the end, you can purchase that so that you have the right to use it on other promotional materials and things like that, because it is nice to have that freedom. But that's why if you ask a designer, to hand over like the source Photoshop files, one of the reasons they won't want to do that is because the fonts and the images are probably licensed to them. So they are violating their licensing agreements if they give that file to you. The other reason is because that design reflects on them and is technically owned by them. So let's say someone hires me to do a cover design, pretend I'm an actual like card carrying union member of the graphic design union. Somebody hires me to do a cover for them. I hand over the file, they change a whole bunch of things, and it no longer looks like anything that I would ever have put out. And so it's my reputation and my sort of brand that's also impacted by that, especially if you've credited your cover designer, right? Which is where things get sketchy. Is it's one thing if nobody knows that you were the person behind that, but a lot of people do credit their cover designer inside. It's a bit like crediting your editor when you don't make any of the changes they asked you to do. Like it's not really fair, because then that is out there in the market representing their ability to edit a clean story or whatever, and if you haven't done the things that they thought it needed to be a good or the right or the whatever story in their opinion, then you are basically saying, oh no, this person thinks this is great just as it is, which is not really fair, because they might have made all kinds of changes and you may have rejected all of them. Just because you got their opinion doesn't mean you have their stamp of final approval on it. So you know, the same way that does work the same way with editors and with cover designers is, you know, making sure you know when to credit, and also making sure that the final product is actually a reflection of that credit in the book. So just something to ponder as you're working through it. But the biggest thing is just fonts and images. Now, you can actually hire somebody to create you a template cover. Like if you're going to do a really long series and you know how to use Photoshop, and you want to be able to change the title yourself when you get 3 years down the road to the point where that book is ready to come out or whatever, then that's something to negotiate right from the beginning, not later, because they will build the cover slightly differently if they know that it's going to need to be edited by somebody who didn't make the template, right? There's lots of little things we do to text or treat images or whatever that when you're doing it for yourself, you don't always label things the same way. You don't always even build them the same way. You might not build them in separate layers that are editable unless you know the person's going to be doing that with them, because it is a bit more work to prepare stuff for someone else to work with. And so if you are asking for like editable source files, then, you know, they may say, yes, but I need you to send me whatever you're going to use before you send it. Or they may not care at all. They may just say, you know what, sure, but don't put my name on it. Like, don't credit me on this, because you're ultimately the one who's making the last changes, and it's going out under your stuff. So you just have to negotiate with that person with whatever they want. Now, if you're using something like Fiverr, it's going to be a little bit different. A lot of people on Fiverr are they're not attached to building their own brand in that sense. Like, you're not going to be required necessarily to credit them inside your book. There's a lot of people who just want to like do work on there to kind of build up their skills, but they don't necessarily want that as a permanent part of their brand. So you can often find people who will build you a template on there and then not really care what you do with it. Just be aware that like some fonts are a couple $100s to license a font. And so for a lot of the designers, that's partly what you're paying for, is that they have image libraries licensed and they have font libraries licensed, and that gives them access to a lot of things. So you just need to be aware that in order to use those, you're going to have them installed as well. So you can actually give advanced direction to your cover designer, like, please only use fonts that are part of Adobe Typekit, or please only use fonts that are like open source fonts or whatever. And you can direct them in terms of what you want and are able to work with. What about original artwork that is commissioned, is Marianne's question. So do you mean like commission photography or like paintings or like paintings and sketches and stuff?
Yeah, drawing, painting.
Yeah. If you are commissioning it, then as long as you get the artist to sign that they are signing over copyright of that image to you, and that's part of your contract and it's written in, then you're good. But just because you pay them to make it for you does not give you the sole license rights to that image unless you actually have them sign a legal contract saying that. And that's an important piece that most people skip.
And also, they have to be limited so that they can't sell it to someone else who can then go and do stuff with it.
Yeah. So that's all. I mean, that's part of your working agreement. If you are hiring an illustrator or an artist to create something for you, you need, a complete rights transfer that's permanent and exclusive, right? Is what you're looking
for. Are there boilerplate contracts for these sorts of things?
Sort of. I bought a package years and years ago that had like a whole ton of those contracts in them. I have adapted them enough that I think I could probably share like a really basic template that covers that with, then I'll just strip out all the identifying information. But we have sort of combined multiple different contracts over the years to get something that we've used to commission artwork for like the kids' books and stuff. So I should be able to share a basic template for that, and then you'd have to just go through it and change it. Now, this will all be precursored, prefaced with, I am not a lawyer, and this does not count as legal advice 100%. You should, if you have a lawyer that you use for your intellectual property stuff, like have them take a look at it. If you think there's any question about, needing it to actually be legal, it will not be officially legal. It will be a guiding form for you. Often having something in writing between two parties is enough to prevent there being issues in the future, because it means they see on paper in black and white what they're agreeing to, and you see what they're agreeing to. And if it's not on the paper, it's not covered. So it's very much just a sort of a behavioral guide and a gentle person's agreement, in that it may or may not hold up in court if ever that is a thing. But in most cases, you'll never get to the point where it's an issue if you've both been clear on exactly what you were getting out of the situation, and what those terms were. So
did you do that with your Fiverr artist who did your map?
Well, because it was inside Fiverr, he had, this is what's included in your package, and it included, exclusive rights to whatever. So it was wrapped up in our Fiverr agreement. But also I gave him permission to use it, not to resell it, but to use it as a promotional piece for his business. So, but we discussed that in writing. So it's not, there are times when it's beneficial for them to actually be sharing it out. So for him to share my town and talk about the project is actually promoting me. So I'm okay with him doing that. So you just have to decide if you are comfortable or not comfortable with that, and how you're going to credit the artist or not. He didn't require that I credit him, but I feel like it's important to acknowledge the people who do good work for us. So I post his name and link back to his stuff when I'm sharing it, in most cases, like where it's appropriate to do that. So Susan's saying for the artwork that they buy for Pulp Lit, they can reproduce it as a cover image with title and names and stuff, but the rights to the artwork itself revert to the artist to sell or use again. And so that is one way that you can sometimes get a break on the pricing of something. You'll notice if you commission something for exclusive use, it's a lot more expensive usually than if you commission the right to use it, but the actual rights remain with the artist. And so same with stock photography you're looking at. You'll see that when you look at the pricing for a lot of the licensing, you'll see that there are characters or people or images that show up in multiple book covers. There's a couple specific images of Grease, for example, that like Eileen's with Malice cover has it, but also another writer from our romance one has it. There's like 3 covers that popped up inside of the same year with the same image. So you can, unless you buy the exclusive rights, which are often $5 or $10 or $20,000 for some of these things, whereas the non-exclusive right might be like $50. So you can see there's some pretty drastic differences. So if you're like Nike and this is going to be your iconic image in your ad campaign, then yes, it makes sense to lock that down. But in a lot of cases, it really doesn't. It's just way too expensive to really care. You just need the other elements that go into it, the font, your name, the way things are configured to be original, and then that is enough you and your book for that to be just fine. So yeah, lots of things to think about. But it really helps to know how you might want to use it in advance. If you're thinking like, oh, I might want to have merchandise for my book that goes with it later, like put that image onto a mug or something. And if you might want to use the image, not just the cover image, then you need to make sure that that's covered in your thing. And yes, cropping is one of the ways that you change that. So you can crop stuff, you can change coloring, you can drop filters onto images. There are so many ways to make them different. Like there's a bunch of my books where, you know, the cover is this much out of a picture that's this big. And so you wouldn't ever necessarily even realize that. And I've changed the colors on the clothing or cropped out the background completely so you get the clean white. You know, there's so many ways to play with an image that it's the exclusivity part is not so key. Now, granted, if you have a character and you want this person that you're getting an image of to be your character, and you're going to use that through your entire series and on every single thing you have and whatever else, then it might be worth looking at actually staging a photo shoot where you get a whole bunch of different poses or something for your covers and your marketing materials and everything else. It's just, it depends how far into that you want to go in terms of your brand. So I don't know if anyone's seen the Finding Fraser cover that Casey Dyer originally had, like not the one that the big publisher did that picked it up, but it is got a guy in a kilt, and the plaid is actually the Fraser plaid. And like she actually had that kilt made and then stage a photo shoot because she wanted it to be an original image and she wanted the tartans to be accurate and everything else. And so, you know, that's a choice that you make in that stage. And then she gave that image to the cover designer and he put it together at that point. So, you know, you just have to decide for yourself what makes sense. But then she was able to use those photos all over her website originally and in all kinds of other places and on promotional materials. And there was never any question about anyone else having exactly the same thing. And there was never a question about whether or not she had the right to do that. So, yeah. Are there more specific questions about working with a cover designer that we could tackle? Or like issues or challenges we're hoping to overcome, or?
Do you just give them their head? You just say, I'm doing a sweet romance and go to.
So most designers will have a questionnaire that they get you to fill out when you're getting started.
Okay.
So usually they should be asking you things like, what are the themes in this book? They should definitely ask what genre it fits into and what subgenre. So, you know, that they're clear which category in Amazon would this be going in, because when they go to poke around at other covers in that genre, that's where they get ideas from a lot of the time or figure out what you're looking for. Now, if you want something different from what is normal in, like, say, a sweet romance cover, then you would tell them. Often they'll also ask, like, what do your main characters look like? Or can you find me a couple that's as close as you think you can get to those characters in one of the image databases. So, you know, if you're poking around, it's really useful to have actual images to send them and say, these are roughly what I think my people look like. Because they're not going to read your whole book. They are going to read the blurb that you send them, and, you know, they're going to have your tagline and then whatever descriptions you give them. So if there are settings in the book, then they would like to know that, because often the backgrounds are determined by the setting. Is it urban or rural? Is it fantasy, you know, with castles and spires, or does it all take place in space, whatever. So, you know, knowing the environment and the couple and the heat level is very important, because if we're talking romance, we're, of course, trying to determine what level of steam is going on there is very useful. And you also now need to be clear, like if you want to buy Amazon ads for a book right now, or Facebook ads, it cannot have sexual content on the cover. So you have to be really careful right now about, if you just say it's a, you know, it's a fairly steamy contemporary romance, and then they design with a passionately embracing couple on the front, you can't use Amazon ads for that anymore. So you have to be aware of your marketing goals. You may need to say, I want you to vary a little bit from what people are doing. Like, we need to try and communicate this, but in a way that doesn't show X, Y, and Z, because that's going to get me refused for my Amazon ad.
Right.
Okay, so, and it now is a little bit of a tricky time because so much is changing around the advertising rules. And so if a designer just has been designing in, you know, contemporary romance or whatever for ages, and they just are going to go and look at what everybody else has on there, there hasn't been enough time for the norm to change because of those things. And not all authors use ads, so some of them don't care about those rules. So you need to know where you stand on that, and you need to communicate that before they get started, because otherwise you're going to end up paying for revisions in addition to the normal, because you didn't give them enough of a warning that this needed to be different in some way. So that's really important. It's useful for them to know if it fits into a specific line of things. Ideally, you're going to pick a cover designer who has a history of your kind of books, right? That is definitely, the more familiar they are with your genre, the more you can give them their head, as the question was phrased. You know, they have a lot of skills. If you're hiring skilled people, it's good to let them use those. Like, it is really, really hard to design when somebody comes to you and says, I want this, 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 and this. And then you've got to figure out a way to make that work. That's not always going to get you the best result. In fact, often you're going to be really disappointed with that. I can definitely say that, you know, the authors I worked with who had already a really clear idea and they wanted to do these 19 things in it, it's really hard to do that and have it still fit the essence or the feeling of that. I think as authors, we get really tied up in the literal of what the story is about, and we're trying to communicate so much with the cover, and like, we don't want it to be people that don't look exactly like our characters, and we don't want, you know, any discrepancies. Like, we've worked so hard in our stories to make sure that everything is consistent and on point, and then often the covers and the characters in the covers have nothing to do with the characters in the book, which makes me a little bit crazy, I have to say, but is pretty standard in the industry. So, yeah, so that's a thing. Okay, so Marianne just saying there seems to be a lot of good digital designers that have a strong preference for fantasy, sci-fi, and crime thrillers, and not as many for romantic women's fiction. So yeah, there are designers who definitely focus in romance, or there's some that do like literary and women's fiction, but it's definitely harder to find that middle ground. And there do seem to be more designers doing like very male heavy genres is sort of how I think of some of that. And I think that is changing, which is good. Like, there's definitely becoming more, but they are, a lot of what you see is definitely like the sci-fi fantasy stuff. there are a few good names that we shared for cover designers in, I think it's in the publish your book section. And kind of as we discover them, then we're sharing those as well. There's going to be some you haven't seen, Marianne. There's definitely people who exist in the world who you've not yet come across. I guarantee that. And it may be that their website is not the easiest find or whatever, but I would say put out, that can be your homework, is put out a call on both Vera and GBWA loops and ask for names of everyone's cover designers that they've used. And there's also the company who I was just reading about, and I think I just shared a link a couple days ago, and they had some nice looking ones. They're not cheap though. You're looking at like $500 a book for a lot of the custom sites. Stuart Bache has a cover design company. I don't know if you've looked at his, but he had some nice ones. That's the guy who works with Mark Dawson. And he has a course design. It's Stuart Bache, and I can't remember the name of his cover company, but it's like all over Mark Dawson stuff. So if you poke around on the on his course site, because Stuart actually did a course on how to design your own covers for Mark Dawson, and so that's like, it's like $100 or $150 or something to take that course. But if you have Photoshop, it's not a bad thing to do. And he has specific like hour-long focused things on different genres. And he actually did like a women's fiction cover, or maybe sort of a romantic comedy one, but he's got different ones for different genres. So you can poke in and see, you know, how that works. And there's also like his company does a lot of the covers for like Stephen King, and like a lot of the big publishers hire out to these designers as well. So the in-house cover designers are not 100% what's being used anymore. There's a lot of contract work happening in the traditional world as well, which is nice because it means we have access to those people too. Yeah, they cost money, but if you want to go that direction, you can. And if you have, say, some essence words to guide your cover designer. So if you think about in terms of what mood are you trying to evoke, right? How do you want people to feel? If you know your branding elements clearly, that is so helpful for them as well. If you know that your brand is, you know, smart fiction for adventurous women or whatever, and you can communicate that to the designer and say, this is my brand. So I want these to be evocative of my brand. You're not saying you have to use X, Y, and Z. But that being said, if you do have different cover designers who are working on different of your books, and you know that you want all your title fonts to be in the same font, then you communicate that to them. Don't let them try and guess that. Don't assume they're going to visit your website and figure that out. You know, you need to absolutely communicate that up front. So if you say, here's my branding, I really like the use of these 5 colors and this font. If there's a way to bring those in, that would be great. Then that's really helpful. Or if you've got a vision for your series, if you know that, let's say you've got, we're going to go dragons because that's fun. Let's say you've got, you know, 5 books in your dragon series, and you know they hatch from different colors of eggs. Like, that's a thing that you know about your world that could be meaningful on a cover, to know that book 1, I want red to be the focus color. Book 2, I want green to be the focus color. Like, whatever you can tell them that has meaning and will help get them closer to what you're doing, the better. And so it's nice if you can give them some of those broad guidelines, and then let them play and see what they come up with. Because guaranteed, they are going to know way more font options or way more ways to put things together than you will. And if they know they're designing for a 5-book series, and they're going to need to customize certain elements on those covers for different things, they're going to come at it very differently than if you say, I need a cover, and then you come back to them 6 months later and say, I need book 2 in that. And they're like, okay, I would have picked a different person on the front who had 10 poses, not one. Or, like there's a lot of things that we don't think about in advance. Unless we know that that's going to be the case. Some models on Shutterstock, for example, have literally one picture, and it might be amazing, but it's one picture, whereas others will have hundreds. And so if you are looking at something that you want the same character but a different position, like Joanne did with JP McLean did with her cover redesign stuff, then she was able to pick a different person who still kind of fit the guidelines, but had all these different positions for the designer to use on different books. I would suggest, if you haven't watched the interviews that I did with JP McLean, to watch them, because they are about rebranding your covers is one of them, and that's specifically the focus of it. So, she took her old covers, she reworked it all with the help of them, but she talks about the process and kind of going through that and what it was like. So if you haven't yet seen that, it is inside, I believe it's the Build Your Brand section on the resources. And then I think it's also up on the YouTube channel now, or will be in the next couple of days. We've just uploaded a ton of stuff. Both those places, you should be able to find it.
So Crystal, when you use a Pixabay photograph, you do own it, right? Or it's open source, so anybody can use it for anything, or am I incorrect?
No, they're not all open source. So that's what you have to be really careful if you're finding a free image, because a lot of them are pulled from like people's Flickr accounts, or like there's a lot of sites where you can share photographs where you never intended for them to end up in an image database. You've got to be really careful to actually follow some of those free ones back to the source. And sometimes they'll have been posted by somebody who didn't have the license. Like they licensed it from Shutterstock and then uploaded it somewhere else and didn't credit it. So like all of these free image sites, they will say like, we're not responsible for any kind of improper usage. That's on the user. So one of the ways is, Natasha's just asking, how do you follow something back to the source? So let's do a little experiment on that. Let's just see what we can do here. Bear with me. I've never actually tried to do this, but not in quite this way, but we'll go on a little adventure. Okay, so what kind of image would somebody be looking for their covers? Anyone? Oh, it's typed. I can't see the chat when I've got this whole thing open here.
She said teacups.
Teacups. Okay. All right, so we're going to look for teacups in images. So that's cute. Okay, let's start with that one. So one of the ways to do that is to actually follow it back to the site, right? So we're going to look at where that actually is. And you can see, I mean, in this case, it looks like it's actually they're selling things. So it's actually a product photo.
But can you look on Pixabay so we can kind of figure out how to work from there?
Yeah, that'll be the next step. This is just if you're finding things online somewhere that you aren't sure where they came from, follow it back, see if it's actually owned by that person. Often there will be like a copyright statement. If someone has used like a Shutterstock photo or whatever, there should be a thing like that. And I'm just going to save this.
And I have also, when I found a picture just like that that didn't have any credits, I have emailed that company, the store, Bombay Duck, whatever, and asked, is this one of your photos? I would like to be able to use it. Can you tell me where how I can get the rights to that?
Yeah.
And I've always had a response from whoever I've done it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are generally pretty good about answering. So if you're not sure, and it's something that is, you found it on someone's site, just send them a note and ask them. And what often is quite scary is they'll say, oh, you know, that's not my picture. I grabbed it from over here. And you're like, okay. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. All right. That's cute. Let's see that one. So let's see. Free for commercial use, no attribution required. Okay, so that's useful, except let's find out here. We're going to do a little search. So I'm going to save this picture to my desktop. And then we're going to try this. We're going to reverse search. So all I typed in was find an image, and this is the first link that pops up. And we're actually going to upload that photo, and the internet's going to check itself for where it might have come from. So that way, even if somebody else screwed up, we're going to have a shot at following our due diligence, right? It's going to show us ads. We're just going to say, show us the picture, please. Okay. So, okay, it shows us it in lots of other places of free stock photos. So that's a good sign. Sometimes you'll put it in and the first thing that pops up is it's a Shutterstock image that someone has grabbed and paid for, maybe, and then reposted in a whole bunch of places as a free image, which violates their terms of service with Shutterstock and will get you in trouble if you're using it, potentially. So, so that's good. So this one, it looks pretty high chances that this is okay because it's listed in so many different free stock photo places. Now, the one place you want to be especially careful is if you are looking at people. And let's try, because a lot of the photos of people, you want to make sure they say like signed model release included in their licensing, because just because the photographer has given permission for it to be on here does not mean that the person who's in the picture signed off. Okay, so, and that's especially if you have kids or young people, but you know, any of these ones, let's try this and see. So this one, it says free for commercial use with no attribution required. So when it says no attribution required, that means you don't have to say where it came from. When it requires an attribution, some of them will say for editorial use only, some will say must credit photographer, and it will have the name. That means if it's going in your book or if it's going on your website, you've got to credit the source there. So yeah, this one doesn't seem to come up here. We're going to save the image. Often if they're super studio pics that, you know, there's a better chance they've been signed off on, but you will see like sometimes it's photographers have taken like wedding photos for people or whatever, and they've ended up there's been a few court cases where somebody's ended up on a billboard and been absolutely freaked out because they never gave permission for their pictures to be used, and suddenly they're part of a major campaign, right? Okay, let's upload another one. Let's see if we find this one somewhere else. And especially if another thing to watch for, if you're hiring someone off like Fiverr and you're paying them $10 to make you a book cover, there's a good chance they're not going through this process. And there was just an article that I think David Cochran shared that was talking about how, you know, you are still responsible if that image violates copyright. So you need to make sure that that's something you have looked at, or at least done a bit of due diligence on. As long as you can show that you did the due diligence and you tried and you document, like, looked here, did this, did that, came up clean, like, just make a note of that somewhere. It doesn't hurt you to do that. So she's showing up Pixabay, Need Pix, lots of free photo sites in various languages. Okay, so that seems okay. The biggest thing you're watching for is if they come up on iStock Photo, Shutterstock, one of the paid stock sites. That's the biggest thing you're looking for. Or if there's any warnings. Sometimes they'll be like, oh my God, don't use this picture. You know, whatever. If there has been a kerfuffle over something. But there you go. So that's a pretty easy step to follow, really. And just click through a couple pages of the Google search results and see what you get. Okay.
Crystal, can I just ask another question? Sort of getting back to style, and it's interesting to me to hear other people talking about their series. And I guess my question is, at least for me, there'd probably be a fair bit of time in between issuing book to book to book to book.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you say, okay, I plan to be the next J.K. Rowling. I know I'm going to have 7 books in my Harry Potter series that is called something else. Over that period of time, because she took many years for those to come out, if you actually look at the covers of those, they're very different.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have our brand, but it's also what is kind of new and fresh at the time you are putting it out. Is that something?
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. So, and if you're thinking multi-years, that's a little different. And you probably, if you're going to have 5 years between books or even 2 years between books, then you don't necessarily want everything done at the same time, because yes, trends might change. Like Amazon might change their rules again and suddenly only object covers. You don't want people on them at all. Like, who knows, right? So yeah, you don't want to firmly commit to everything. But if you're looking at, you know, three to 5 books inside of a 2-year period that you might want to release, like, it makes sense to be consistent. It's also, books are not having the same cover for their lifetime anymore. That's also not a thing. So, you know, keeping in mind that you are going to build a for now look for things, and that it may change and you may rebrand them as you get more established. Your budget also changes. If the book makes money and, you know, then you can kind of upscale it. That's also a possibility. You may put together a box set cover as a different thing that looks totally different as well. Like, there's so many ways around that. And that's how a lot of people will do it. They'll do what they can in the beginning with their first, you know, 3 books or whatever. And they'll get a reasonably priced cover that works, but maybe isn't like, oh my God, amazing. And then they'll re-release them as a box set after that last one has come out, and they'll upscale the box set cover. So you might pay a more expensive designer to design your box set cover that's a little bit more what you were hoping for in the beginning but couldn't quite afford or didn't know, you know, whatever. So it's an option to kind of, if you're going to do a box set, to go up in terms of what you pay for, get out of that process. And by that point, you'll have a better idea of feedback from the market, and you'll see what's selling then. And so that's like a cheater way to refresh your covers without doing all of them in quite the same way. Yeah, so something to look at. Yeah, but you don't want to go, like, if you think it's gonna be like 5-10 years down the road that you're releasing things, you don't want covers yet for those. Yeah. Just in the world of, you know, fairly rapid releases, where often, like, if it's romance, we're looking at, if you've got a 5-book series, you might release them all in the same year, you know? And so you don't want to be, the other thing that comes up is often the cover designers will get booked up and their rates will go up as they get more established. And you may be looking at 6 to 12 months wait period to get a cover from a lot of the designers. I know a lot of the people friends that I have who are writers, like they are on wait lists with their own designers for getting their next cover, and there is no quick turnaround on anything like that. So it's important to sort of protect yourself that way as well, so that your releases are not waiting on receiving a cover, and that you're able to do some things in advance of your book coming out and have everything you need. So yeah, keep that in mind as well. Okay, so on Shutterstock, I'm confused when the image details say under upgrade, usage in web or printed design templates. Okay, does this mean I need the enhanced license to use it on a website or printed book cover? So on Shutterstock, the standard license is usually going to be fine for book covers, because it's pretty unusual that you would sell over, I don't know, 100,000 or whatever it is, you know, the thing is. So for most stuff that we're ever going to need them for, the standard license is fine. It would be if you were planning a print ad campaign and you knew you were going to have, you know, 10 million eyes on magazine copies, that would be, you know, that's printed, it's larger than what is licensed for. If you were going to make 100,000 t-shirts of merchandise on something or whatever, then that's an issue. Now, the cool thing about this is you can always get the standard license, and if something takes off, you can upgrade your license on that image. So, you know, you start off and you license your image, and you suddenly your book goes crazy and like 2 million people buy it, and then you can have the money and you can pay them to upgrade your license. You don't get in trouble until after it goes past it. It's not like a backdated thing. So you'll notice if your sales are getting that big, and that'll be a good reminder when you get that $1 million check to pop through your licensing on your images and just make sure you're up to snuff. So yeah. Would that we should all have that problem, let's just say. But yes, normally the regular license is no problem. Definitely keep that in mind when you're swimming in your Scrooge McDuck pile of coins. Okay, so I should totally ask for my next royalty check in loonies, please, so I can feel like I really got a lot. That'd be awesome. Okay, so we should just take a couple minutes. We'll pop over and talk about setting up a Permafree book, just as the basic steps, since I promised to do that. And that will generate a bunch of questions, which we can then use to fuel our next office hours discussion, if not answer it beforehand. Okay, so in terms of how to do it, there are a couple challenges. One is that if you go to set up a book on KDP and you try to set the dollars for $0 in terms of the cost, it will not let you do that. Amazon does not let you just set books to $0. However, their uber competitive nature makes them match everyone else's prices. So the way we get a Permafree book on Amazon is we take a little end run around Amazon. So you can use Draft to Digital, and then I believe Publish Drive will also let you set a book to $0. So Publish Drive is the Draft to Digital equivalent, but they have a slightly wider market. They're a little bit newer of a player, and they're based out of, I think, Hungary. But they have a lot of sales partners that are not available in North America. So they do a lot of selling into China and things like that. So when you're trying to decide which one to use, you can look at both Draft to Digital and Publish Drive. I have not yet explored Publish Drive fully. We are setting up our nonfiction books for the Creative Academy through them. So I will keep you posted on that little adventure. But they do have some interesting opportunities for marketing and stuff, which is less relevant on a Permafree book. So for now, you can use Draft to Digital, and you set up your book with Draft to Digital, and you set your retail price as $0, and it will let you do that. And then you go over to Amazon and you set up the book for the minimum price it will let you, which is usually 99 cents. And then you send a little note to Amazon from your account that says, "Dear Amazon, I have noticed you need to price match this book," basically. and they will then say in an email, we do not promise to match blah, 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 blah. And basically, it's their little disclaimer of pricing is up to us and you can't make us do that. And then within about 24 hours, the most, your price will be changed to zero. They send you the refusal notice every single time, just as saying, like, we don't have to, just because you're asking doesn't mean we have to. But they do actually do that every single time. So, Bonnie, if you have any specific questions on the how to do that, or just like the general steps in the process. Sorry, you're muted.
I just need to hear the general steps before I have questions. So
Okay.
I'll just take a listen. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Yeah, so basically you prep your files for uploading. So it would be, using Vellum, or you can use the Draft to Digital layout tool if you want. That works great as well. So you'd go in there, upload your Word doc to the Draft to Digital tool, and then it goes crunch, 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 and it turns it into an EPUB and a MOBI. So then you have the EPUB is what stays on Draft to Digital, and that one goes to everywhere. And then the MOBI file hops over to KDP, and then that's the file that you would upload to your KDP account. And yeah, so you need your cover, you need your book blurb, and you need your Word doc with your content in it. If you're looking to do yourself a favor in terms of making the file conversion easy, if you use the styles in Word so that your chapter headings are actually using the heading style, then it picks those up better, because when it pulls the file in, it can see that there was a break there and that there's a new style. And so it helps to get consistent styling for your headings and things like that if it's already marked in your document.
Also, if I can add one little thing, a mistake that I made when I first made my first Permafree.
Mm-hmm.
Draft to Digital had just made its
The end matter and stuff?
no, it had just made its deal with Amazon to be one of the retailers.
Right.
And so I loaded up my book in Draft to Digital, and I marked all the retailers I wanted it to be marketed to, and I also marked Amazon.
Right.
Well, from then on, Amazon wouldn't work with me because it wasn't their book. It was Draft to Digital's book. Yeah. So any problems that I had with showing reviews or doing anything else, Amazon wouldn't help me. I had to take it out of Draft to Digital, put it back into KDP, and then go through the process that you just mentioned of getting Amazon then to price match so I could have this Permafree book.
Right. So yeah, definitely that's super important is you want to disable the Amazon channel through Draft to Digital. So you want to go direct to your KDP account. And because it's Permafree and because it's available in other places, you cannot put it into Kindle Unlimited and you cannot choose KDP Select. So, that's a really important thing just to keep in mind, is that you need to make sure that you have direct to your KDP account. You do not sign up for Kindle Unlimited, and then you also have it active on Draft to Digital, and then it's set to 0 on there. And then you're not violating anyone's terms of service. If you're feeling very adventurous and you want to hit all of your bases, you could also then upload that EPUB file to Publish Drive, and you could say activate in all of the channels that are not already covered by Draft to Digital. So you could open up your Draft to Digital account. You'd see there's about 30 stores or something, 40 stores in your Draft to Digital account. There's about 400 stores on Publish Drive. So you can actually activate all the rest of the channels if you want in Publish Drive. So you actually would have it in 3 places. Now, the value of having a Permafree book in all of those places is twofold, right? One, you want to be driving traffic to your other books. So if you don't have any other books that are published wide and they're only in KU, you're not going to get value out of that in the same way. You might have people who are on multiple channels who hop over, but chances are good if they read on Amazon, that's where they'd get their free books from anyway. You will be reaching people who, there's lots of countries who don't have Amazon, actually. So, as much as we think that's not a thing anymore, it is. So those are markets you can access, but there isn't anything else for them to buy. So what you do need to make sure is that there's some really clear pathway that is a benefit to you, because you want to have them read that and then have something to do or somewhere to go. So you can really focus on getting people onto your newsletter list from the back of your Permafree book, right? That might be a goal as well. So it may be as much about getting them to sign up for your list so that when you do have another book that comes out in their space, wherever that is, that you can send that info their way. And yes, you have to have another platform to make it free on Amazon. So you do have to go wide, but you don't necessarily have to go publish drive wide, if that makes sense. Like there's those 40 stores, yep, required, but not everywhere. And it doesn't hurt to start building reviews on those other platforms for your free book. At some point in the future, you might decide to go wide with some of your other books, or you might decide that you are going to change that free book to a paid book at some point in the future, right? You don't have to use the same lead magnet for your whole life as an author. So you may rotate that around depending on what other things you want to do. Does that make sense? Because yes, if you have another thing to think about, if you're doing a box set, if the first one is Permafree, your box set cannot be in Kindle Unlimited. So I ran into this challenge when I did the first box set, because Silver Bells is free everywhere. And then the next 3 books are in Kindle Unlimited and they're in KDP Select. And I bundled all 4 of them into a box set, which means I have to leave that box set exclusive to Amazon, but I can't get the special features of being able to offer deals on it or having it included in KU because there's content in it that is wide. So you just have to be aware of when you start bundling things, everything inside that bundle has to still fit the agreements that you've made with the various distributors. Now, I think if I had 10 or 11 books in the box set, I could get away with that because it's no more than, I want to say 10% of the content is available anywhere else. So if that were the case, then I think I could get away with that, but you'd want to be real careful about it because, yeah, playing the margins with Amazon does not generally work out in your favor. Yeah, so mostly being really aware of what your goal is with that product, like what do you want to do with it and why. But the good news is if you do have a Permafree book and you're wide with it, you can give it away on Amazon, you can give it away on every platform around the world, you can give it away on your own website. I have tons of people who sign up for my newsletter to get the free copy of Silver Bells they could get from any other place, but for whatever reason, they do it from my site, so that's fine. And you also can then also put those books into BookFunnel. So you can do BookFunnel promos with your Permafree books. So, I've got the first one in each of the 2 lines, and I give those away all the time in all of the places because you never know how people are going to find you. Even if they do read on Kindle, they might not poke around in the free book section, or it might not catch their attention that day. But if it's bundled up in another promo somehow, then they find it. So there's no real rhyme or reason to that except that you're just throwing as many hooks in the water as you possibly can. To go back our fishing metaphor from the other day, you're just trying to get people into your net no matter how. You want to get them hooked on your books. Okay. It is noon. That went by really fast. Any other burning questions you want to drop into the sidebar? I can answer one more quick question, and also if there's longer questions, then it'll help me know what goes next in the next office hours. So, a quick question from Leslie. Yes. I'm going to unmute you, okay? Okay. What's your question, Leslie?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, if you have like a potential series and you have them all ready to go and you're ready to put your first one out and you do it, every few months, do you put something in the blurb of that first book going, the first of 3 books, or just to give people a heads up? Or
yeah, people do like to know, like this is book 1 of 3 or 2 of 3 or 3 of 3. Some people, and if you know the titles of the other books, it's really good to actually write that. Like you'll see at the bottom of a lot of the blurbs, it'll say like part of the whatever series, and it'll say book 1, book 2, book 3, and it'll have the names just to get you thinking about that and to make it familiar. And then also to have in the back of the book, watch for X coming in, whatever. And I would say if you are the one in charge of releasing, if you're indieing things, the closer together those releases can be, the better. Like if you're looking at choosing about 8 weeks,
for all 3?
Well, like, no, so in between them, if you're looking at release patterns and these are your first 3 books, then closer together is better. There are lots of people who won't start a series till it's complete. There are also, book 3 seems to be the tipping point for most things. So if you think of a reader who comes in, if they've got 3 books to buy and they like the first one, they'll keep reading. But the chances of them coming back later and finding you and deciding to re-engage again are way lower. So if you're looking at your read-through capture, so the number of people who come into your world and then read all the things you have before they exit out your world and go off and get distracted by everything else, you really want to keep them in that flow as much as possible.
So how fast is fast?
Like they say that your stats drop about 30% each month on sales. So, and you can see that on my sales reports when I release a new thing. If I don't have a release for 3 months, it's like it's 30% down, 30% down, 30% down, and I'm back to like the base of a couple $100 a month or whatever. But you have to keep that going. So any more than 3 months in between, and you are at a pretty flatlined level. Generally speaking, unless you're pumping in a lot of ad revenue. But even then, if you're putting ads in and you don't have 2 or 3 books for people to buy through, you're not going to make your money back on your ads in a lot of cases. So
around 6 weeks would be optimum.
Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks is great. And it depends on length of books as well, right? How long they are.
I'm not sure, because I've only read a couple of yours and I read them in different series. Do you put a little, like I see writers put like the first chapter of their next book at the end of the first book?
Yeah, always. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, there's the first chapter of the next book, and there's like a call to action for them to get that. Or if there's a box set, then it says, read on for the next story in it, or just one click the box set. And a lot of people just do that instead of keeping going. Because they don't want to like spoil it. If they're just going to buy the box set anyway, then you don't want to have already read the first chapter. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of people click that back of book.
That's great.
Great option. But yes, until I had somewhere for them to go immediately, it was like, yeah. Like it's just like you throw a rock, the wall's right there, and it drops to the ground. And you're like, okay, I'll never see that reader again. Because they're just, people find fluffy, sparkly things and off they go, right? Like, there's no reeling them back. So it's very much the better positioned you are to have those magic 3 things to start with, the better. And if they're all in one series, it's so much more powerful because you do get that read through. And read through on a series is highest for the first 3 books. After that, it starts to drop 100% across the board is people's experience. People get distracted, shiny things. So yes, yeah, get busy, write the next 2 books, exactly. So if you're thinking you're going to launch a series, then having the first 3 completely written, at least drafted before you're ready to release, is the best advice I could give to anybody, I think, because my only regret about how I did things is not having had more books ready, because then you're in writing and launching mode at the same time and you're kind of drowning a little, and it's pretty easy to get slowed down so much. Like you've got to pretty much double or triple your writing time if you're also managing marketing and publishing side of things. So
one last quick question, because I got
sure.
So would it be okay if you had a series of 3 and you're setting up everything and all the potential conflict in the first one? Is it okay if the first one's longer than the next 2?
I don't think they all have to be exactly the same length, as long as you make sure that they feel equal in terms of the content, right? Like, and I don't mean length, but I mean importance, and
right,
like they need to feel balanced in terms of each one being a complete story and still having its own arc and all of those things.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Thank you, Crystal. Thanks, everyone.
And yeah, Marianne, not necessarily that they have to be shorter is better. It is obviously easier to release things faster when they're shorter, because time, physics, all the things. But if you're looking for KU page reads and stuff, then it's actually having longer is actually better. And people really like longer stories, by which I mean like that 50 to 80K is kind of the sweet spot in terms of page reads. Because right now I make so much less on a book that's read through KU than I do through one that's purchased, because I don't have enough pages in them to make it up. It's 0.04 cents a page or whatever. It's like not much. So, you know, I might make $2 off a book that's purchased, and I might make like 20 cents off of one that's read through KU. So if for short books, it doesn't make sense that way, but for long books, it does.
I have a question for you, Crystal, regarding the page reads on KU. If you add that first chapter to the end of your book, do those count as page reads too?
Yep. But don't add more than the first chapter, because if you've heard all the drama about stacking and stuffing and all of those things, people were putting bonus content into their books. So preview chapters from like 10 other books or whatever, and like all kinds of stuff to get those page reads up. And that is not okay. You can't have more than, I don't know what the percentage is. I want to say 10 to 20%. It might even be dialed back to 10 right now, but anyway, be careful about that. Like, don't have more than about your first chapter. And don't put the first long chapter of a long book in the back of a short story, because that will get you in trouble. It's percentage, like it's a percentage-based algorithm. So if your book's 200 pages, that you can get away with maybe a 10 to 20 page preview at the end. But if your book is, 20 pages, you get 2 pages of preview. Yeah. Uh-huh. All right. Oh, Marianne, I can't.
No, the question was about short series, not short books. Because you were saying the readership drops off, or purchasing drops off after the 3rd book. So I'm thinking like Game of Thrones, like that's different, obviously. Right. But maybe it would be better to have like 3 or 4 book series and then start a new series, rather than keep going in the same series for 8 or 10 books.
So interesting here. And we had a good chat with Cora about this, that getting readers to start a new series is really hard. So readership might drop a little bit after book 4 or 5, whatever, but it's still going to be likely higher sales than starting a whole new one. So expect to see a little bit of tapering off, and that's just normal. That's just the normal shape of the curve in terms of how that works with a series. But I don't know, 3 to 5 books is 3 to 7 books, depending on where you're going. But 3 to 5 seems to be a pretty sweet spot in terms of what you can do with box sets and whatever else. And that's the other thing, you can have 2 smaller box sets. If you're writing full-length books, you don't want to have 7 full-length books in a box set for $9.99, but you always want to be pricing in that $2.99 to $9.99 if you can, because that's where your 70% royalties come from Amazon. So that's the other thing you're thinking about when you're looking at products and how to package things up, is trying to keep the products in that range, because that's where your sweet spot is for the money. So you're better to break it into, if let's say you've got 7 books in your series, maybe the first one's Permafree and then 2 3-book box sets, at least for Amazon. If you're wide, you can price them at whatever you want. So You can, in your other stores, maybe you have a box set of all of them that is $24.99 or something like that. On other platforms, you can do that. But on Amazon, all that does is cost you money. So it doesn't really make sense. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I will return to birthdaying.
Back to writing. Massive numbers of words.
Happy birthday to Jared, and tell him
Good to see you
so
guys.
much for lending you out.
Yes. He charges a minimal rental fee, so we're good. I will pass that along. He's off buying a new iPad, so I guess that was the rental fee. Unsupervised. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks all for coming out. We are going to tackle on Wednesday night. We're going to do one more round of author branding. And next Monday, we're going to start doing a website makeover with Eileen as our case study. So I'm going to be redoing her website while showing all of you how to build the pieces and a little intimate demonstration of how Divi works, because we're going to use Divi for that. And then you can see a combination of tech stuff and style stuff and art stuff, and we can all have some input into how Eileen's website turns out looking, which will also be kind of fun. It'll be crowdsourced.
Excellent.
All right. Awesome. Well, we'll see you all soon.
Talk to you later.
Happy
Bye.
writing.